Cool. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Ben's Furby CSS challenge. So what we're trying to do here is make this happen in CSS. We got a couple things going on here, but I think we can make this happen in an hour and 15 minutes. So I'm going to download it. Image.ping. Awesome. I'm going to use this view app that I was using in the last one. Serving up there, no tests. Cool. So if I go over to public, I'm just going to move that. It's probably this one. Furby.ping. Okay, cool. And then if I go over to the app, get rid of all this, get rid of all this. All right, there it is. Cool. So some things that immediately jump out to me about this are like a couple things. I'm going to write them down. I'm going to need that graphic. I'm going to need to find a match for the typeface. Close enough for us at least. Is it just one? So I've got a couple weights there. So is that really thin one? That looks like a different typeface entirely. Might not be. We can play with it a little bit. There's potentially two typefaces there. Some other things that I'm noticing are that looks like probably a pure black and white, maybe a little bit softer. But there's also this little gradient. So it starts out as this color, and then kind of towards the bottom, it gets darker. I see that over here too. You know, that might just be an inset box shadow. So you can do shadows on things down. You can also do them back up into the thing. That might work better than a gradient. Okay. And then this like T going into this, that looks like it's hard. It's super not. It's gonna be the easiest thing in this entire thing. Cool. Now, next thing I got to figure out is what are the macro parts of this? So is this all one big unit here? Or is it actually split? Oh, you know what? I think this is, oh, motherfuckers cheated. I'm pretty sure that this Furby thing with the background, I think that's all part of the image. Here, let's see if we can find it. A24 auctions.
The image should be in the forge this page if you wanted it quick.
I DM'd it to you also. Just the screenshot I got, but yeah, it's gonna have that gradient on it regardless.
Ooh, this is all we got. It does have the gray. Okay. Furby. So I'm going to move that one into this public folder also. Download spaces of radio. Nope. Just put it right back in there. Oh. All right, so if I make this Furby.jpg. All right, cool, it's there. Yeah, it's already got the gray on it. There's still, and you can actually see it all along the bottom here. Yeah, that looks like a super tiny like inset shadow. So it's an inset shadow, but otherwise I don't think there's any other colors that we need to try to match, which is kind of nice. And I think that this is all one thing. So let's figure out what like the big pieces of this are. There's this menu up here. And it's not quite centered. So then you see, like, are there other things that I could combine with it that would give me a clear answer to that? Like, is it offset a specific amount from this? Because like this login goes all the way to the edge. So we have this like login stuff here. Is that centered in the remainder of it? Not really. Do these line up with anything? Not really. All right, maybe it is just offset from that. So like some amount over from that. We have navigation. And then it does look directly centered under that. We have like the title of it. Okay, previous lot, next lot. So we have like a nav that's kind of there. Geez, this is a hard one. So we have a previous and next there. We have this background image. Is it bisecting it? Yeah, kinda. No. That looks like it's probably a golden ratio kind of thing. So nav. It's probably something like this. That's the image. And then this one. Okay, all of this looks like a box with that. The T like going outside of this is like a little deceptive, I think. And that nav is in there too. Okay, that makes a lot more sense of it. So we'll have that. And that goes like all the way to that line almost. And then all of this is kind of inside of that. We have a little bit of like what we call negative margin coming out of it there. And then on this alignment on the left, those things come in. Okay, so from our macro layout, I think that's kind of what we're looking at. Cool, I feel all right about that. Ask me some questions about the process that I just did.
So are you trying, were you trying to like figure out like what like elements are going to be like in the same containers kind of thing, or nested
A
within
little
each
bit.
other?
I'm not even like
Or not
all
at
the
that
way there
point?
yet. Like,
Okay.
I'm at this point, I'm trying to figure out what are the big chunks, because like all of this stuff, these aren't chunks. Like all of that together is one chunk. And then same thing with all of this. That's all one chunk. And like it's a little deceptive because that part peeks out of it a little bit. That's a chunk. That's a chunk. That's a chunk. The image is a chunk. And then what are those big chunks and what are their relationships without being distracted by all the detail?
Okay, thanks.
Other questions?
I think the only thing that comes to mind is wondering if, I'm assuming that little block of text that has the title in it is all one like section. If you, but yeah, or the Furby thing.
Uh-huh.
So would you put the actual header, like, or the H1, which I'm assuming that would be an H1, like in its own div and then give it a negative margin so it's on a different alignment than the others? Or will that mess it up?
I'll show you my magic trick for that one when we get there. But yeah, we're going to need to be able to target that one by itself, separate from the rest of this, and tweak it a little bit. But it's actually not nearly as bad as it looks. And no, this would not be an H1. In fact, it's a great example of size not being like the only thing that really determines a page. I think A24 auctions is the H1. This is probably the H2. Semantically, the name of the site is more important than this. Visually, that's the first thing we want to notice. Other questions? All right, let's keep going. So now I want to start roughing in this content and just getting it on the page. So I'm going to, all that like open to it works and A24 options. I think all of that is a header with a nav and an H1 in it. And it is a list of links. Oh, this is kind of interesting. That that little like slash in there. So that's not a list of links like that, or that's not an item on a list of links. So what this is kind of telling me is that these are two separate lists. So I think that might actually be more like this. Oops, screwed something up. There we go. That have this, because like that slash, semantically, it's nothing. It's a purely decorative separator. So I would go to some pains to keep that out of your HTML. I'll show you how we can do that with CSS. And then below both of these, how about I do this? Yeah, it's one nav with two ULs inside of it. And then this is A24 options. Cool. That feels pretty good, actually. All right, and then I also, in the, I want to call it all one header. Really, that entire thing is kind of the header. So like what I'm considering is this nav, the H24 options, and the login. Should the header like really kind of be that entire thing?
Do you want us to tell you what the HTML looks like?
No,
Okay.
they probably did it wrong. Nobody gives a shit about semantics around here. All right, I'm going to go with the login and sign up that's its own thing. Well, all right. If I make it its own thing, it would probably look something like so now, like, my first temptation is to make it a div that has two links in it. Log in, sign up. Okay. Now I have to think, like, is there a better thing I could do than a div for that? Is that a section? Those are two things that are easy to mess up. The distinction between them is a section, something that has a heading, or like should have a heading, and that really doesn't. All right, I'm fine with calling that a div. Call that auth. And also the open and coming soon. A few ways we could do that. Like you could put like the strike elements on them. That probably even works just by itself. Like that. I don't like it though. That feels like a thing that you would probably do programmatically. Like you flip a switch and those things change, which tells me that they're probably better off being classes. So I would say that like the class is like disabled. Cool. All right, so I feel all right about that. Now let's take a look at this thing here. Now, is that, like, what is that container? And I kind of want to call this a section. So I have a section. Sections have headings. The section's heading would be the Furby. I'm intentionally not uppercasing it. That's another like, semantically, it's not uppercase letters, just visually. So we should do it with CSS, not with HTML. I'm gonna say that it has that like, that gems from gems thing. That is, that might be a heading. That might be a tertiary heading. No. Gems from gems. Now that one, this is italicized. So I don't even know quite what they're referring to. Is that like, it's like a citation kind of? Let's see, what is the semantic meaning of the cite tag? Used to describe a reference to a cited creative work. First sentence in 1984. Yeah, I'm going with that. So that is a semantic thing. And then this has a nav also. Which has a list of links. A little list, that's not really a list. So in this nav, we'll have that, previous lot, and then next lot. And then those little arrows, also decorative. They have no semantic meaning to this. They're a little visual indicators. So we're gonna do those with CSS too. All right, so we got the Furby. From say ended on May 2020. Cool. And then, okay, so I did this in a section. I'm going to call this, anytime you're using a div or a section, you should probably give it some kind of label. Since those are so generic, like why? What is it? So I could call this something like item details, and then make another section that's called like auction details. Might be better names for those. And this one, we've got, so this is quite paragraph text. I'm trying to decide if they're generic containers or not. Now I'm trying to consider, does that count as tabular data? I think it might be. I'm going to start there. See how mad it makes me. Say that the head of it has a row with a table head of final bid and table data. Oop, sorry, also the other headings, and reserve and bidders. And then the table body is a row with that, none, and 12. All right, I think that's all the content on the page. So I need to figure out where the actual like Furby thing is going to go. The way that I'll bet they did it, that looks like a CSS background image to me. But if we have to do that, we can. But I still sort of want to make that. That is semantic. That's important. That's part of the actual thing. So I sort of want to put that here and see if I can't figure out some way to just get that to achieve this effect without making it a CSS background. I might not be able to. All right. So let's take a look at this. That's what we get with no CSS. A good way that like you did this right is if this still sort of works. If I wanted to be like a real fuster about semantics, I would move the H1 to the top probably. And yeah, that's probably the only thing I would change. And then use something like Flexbox ordering to change how it's visually presented, but I don't hate that. That works. All right, so now we gotta start making it look more like this. So actually, before I do that, any other questions about the like semantic HTMLing process that I just went through?
Yeah, I was wondering why the links up top were considered nav and the previous and next lot was nav, but the login and sign up were not.
Because you could make an argument that these are navigation also. The reason I didn't put them there is that I think of navigation as moving to different pages on the site. I think of logging in and signing up as actions that you are taking. Even though they are literally on different pages, semantically, I don't think they'd have to be. Like you could imagine something where you click one of those and like a little dialogue pops up or a modal or something like that. They just happen to be on other pages, but there's no content there. So that feels like not a navigation to me. If somebody wanted to make an issue like in a pull request about it, like I probably wouldn't find it too hard though. Other questions?
Is there any way to imply or impart semantic meaning in CSS, or it all has to be done on the HTML?
All has to be done in the HTML. All right, let's see if I can get some of this macro layout stuff done. So let's start with this header. Can I get the header to kind of look like that? So I'm going to say that this entire header, I could probably either grid it or flex it. I'm going to start by, I'm going to do a little bit of both. So here's my strategy. So I've got all of this as the header. And I want to break this up into like down here, up here, and like over here. So that feels like a decent one for grid. Okay. I'm not quite as fast with grid as I am with Flexbox, but I'm getting better at it. Okay, so this entire thing is the app. Scope it. Target the header. Display should be grid. The grid row template. Grid row template. There's 2 of them, and could probably make both of those auto. That's just whatever the content is, like that's how much space the thing should take up. Not too fussy about it. And the grid column template, it's 2 columns. Now those are a little bit different. Those are offset substantially. So I got to think of a way that I can kind of describe that. One way I could do it, and I don't love this. Actually, no, shit, that totally works. What if this is just however big the content is, and this takes up the remaining amount? Yeah. So that would be auto and then 1 fractional unit. Cool. And where are we? Okay, so that's there. Now, is it? Doesn't like the syntax. I'm going to look at my own notes, which you are free to use as well. Where is it? Grid template row/columns. There we go. So it's grid template maybe like that. All right. Less mad now. Okay, now I need to get those things in like the places in the grid where I want them to be. So this header has grid and flex only work with your direct children. So the grid that I just made only applies to nav, h1, and like the auth div. So I have this auth one, and I have the nav one, and the other one was the h1. So I can say that h1 should be grid row 2. And that's, yeah, there we go. That should move that one down there. And then everything else looks like it kind of does it pretty good automatically. All right. So inside of the nav, I'm going to say all of the ULs inside of this nav should be list. Nope. Should be display flex, and they should go row wrap. All right, cool. And then since we put them in lists, we need to kill the list style. So like list style none. That makes those bullets go away. And we want those two, it's two ULs next to each other, I think, right? Yeah. So we want them to stay next to each other. So this is like pro CSS shit. So there's grid and there's flex. Both of them are by default block level elements. But you can make them inline elements like that. And now they sit right next to each other. How cool is that? Check out that. Cool, next thing. None of the links on this thing have like underlines, looks like. That one does. Those two do. None of those do though. So we're gonna say that all of the nav anchors have no text decoration. And they're all uppercased too. So we can say text transform uppercase. All right. And then their color. This is, you've probably seen this come up like in a tutorial or something, and then it promptly flew out of your brain because you never used it again. But we want the color for that to be dependent on whatever the color of the text is. Because I can say black, but then if like that changes to a light gray, well, I explicitly said I wanted that anchor to be black. So I need to change it there too. That sucks. So instead I can say inherit, and it'll be whatever the parent's color is. It'll make it that. It's kind of nice. All right, so the reason those two things are spaced apart is there's like a margin. Actually, I think it's padding. Yeah, that little padding right there that's built into the ULs. I hate that. So we're going to reset it out. I'm going to make a styles folder in here. I'm going to make a reset. And I'm going to open up that reset. And I'm just going to copy paste the Maya reset. And then import it in at the top of this. So I'll say import at import something like that. Oh, need the. There we go, much better. All right, so those are all jammed together now. And that's what my header looks like. Nice, it's actually coming along pretty well. So I want to get these, both of those look like they're kind of centered inside of their things. So yeah, that H1 and that nav. I want, let's see. So I'm going to say that that nav should, I want to flex its children. So I can say something like justify content center, flex flow row wrap. Cool. So, and then I can do the exact same thing with the, oh, actually the H1 is just text. So that one is a text align center. So the difference is that with the nav, I'm flexing these children. The H1 doesn't have children, it's just text. And so I'm saying I want the text to be in the middle of that container, with a nav, I'm saying I want these elements to be in the middle. So that's why I had to do 2 different strategies for it. But when I do it, nice. All right, so what am I looking at for padding and what have you on these? So looks like they both have a fair sum. Oh, and also any anchors that were disabled, text transform strike. How do I do a strike through? CSS strike through.
Font style.
No, it's line through. There it is. Did I get those right? Anchors that are disabled. Didn't like that. Invalid property value. Did I spell it wrong?
Isn't it? Text decoration.
Text decoration. Thank you. It's the end of the day for everybody. All right, there we go. So now those have that thing on it. Padding wise, let's see. Does the entire container have some padding on it? It kind of does. So I'm going to start that at 24 pixels, maybe. Okay. Or more. So I'll make that 48 pixels. All right, that's kind of getting me more in the ballpark. And then, the fact that this nav has like a pretty even amount of padding on either side makes you think that the thing I just did was wrong. I think maybe that should go in the nav instead. And then also apply it to the auth. Yeah, that feels better. Okay, can't avoid it. Oh, A24 auctions is not text transformed. Login and sign up are. So we can uppercase those. And we also need to, let's see. So this applies to like everything inside of this header. So I'm going to move it outside of it. All right, that's a little bit better. Okay, so I need to get these things like getting away from each other. So a way to do that would be that every LI in here should have a margin right of 24 pixels. It's way more than that. It's more in the ballpark. Oh, and I mentioned that we need something to like separate those. So check this out. You can say any UL that follows a UL before it should have content of slash. All right, so I've got that in there. And then I can, let's see. If I did something like margin left 48 pixels. Oh, right. It would have to be on the other side. Oh, shoot. Maybe I can do it here. Is our margin right? There we go. Nice. Purely decorative, pure CSS. All right, so there's not a whole lot else we can do until we start figuring out this typography thing. So let's see if we can kind of match it. So that looks pretty Helvetica-ish. It's a sans serif that's got like at least one super heavyweight. And then whatever that typeface is, which I don't feel like is the same thing, it's also a sans serif. So we can narrow this down substantially. I'm going to go with things that have a pretty fair number of styles on them. Maybe Roboto. Oh, we can also tell it A24 auctions. A24 auctions. And then I wonder if it will. Shoot, it won't let me change the weight. That's too bad. Auctions. So one of the ways you can do this, like Poppins looks kind of close. Look at like some of the distinguishing characters, like that A. How big is the little triangle inside of it, and how big is the thing underneath? Like this one has a pretty small little inner triangle. Like it just sits up a lot higher than it is in Poppins. That U looks pretty close. C looks pretty close. It's the same kind of T. There's like 3 different ways you can do a T. This one has the little like tail that goes pretty straightforward that way. Rubik. Same issue with the A. At the heavier weight, they might tighten that up. All right, I'm going to go with Poppins. And let's take a look at, yeah, that heavier weight. Look at 700, maybe 600. Close enough for jazz. All right, so I'm going to go with a 600 for that. And then that, like the Furby thing. The Furby. Come on, there we go. Looks like an 800. So I'm gonna grab that one too. And then this is certainly possible. I kind of don't think it is. Oh, maybe that, the Gems from Gems, maybe that's the same typeface. So let's take a look at a pretty thin one. Gems from Gems. Like is the 100, it's a little bit thicker than that. The 300, yeah, that works. And then I think this other one is a completely different typeface. So we're going to keep those in there. So this is also a sans serif. And it's the weirdest looking thing. Browse titles. Let's see if we can get something that says browse titles. And like that O is kind of long. The R looks like it's a particular kind of looking thing. So I'm looking for something that has that kind of geometric R, where like the R is trying to take up all the space. Not these ones that have like the lines. This one maybe. Maybe that one. So that S, that's super angular. That's way more than they have there. So it needs to have, still needs to have some curve in the S. Ooh, Fira condensed. Ah, the R isn't really right. I'll check this one out. So browse titles doesn't have a super thin weight. That's going to be a requirement for this because it has a really thin weight. Oh, everybody loves Montserrat. Check their 300 for that. That W comes up way higher in this one. The railway has a little like Art Deco crossed one. One have like a W that doesn't come up all the way. This one looked all right. Yeah, their 300 I think is kind of more like what we're talking about. All right, I'm going to grab those and I'm going to import them in. And then I'm going to say that was Poppins and Rubik, names of those. So I'm going to say the default typeface on this is probably the Rubik. So I could say something like font family Rubik sans serif. And then if I say that H1 is Poppins, at a shit, what was the weight on? So for Poppins, I got 300, 600, and 800. I think that was the 600 and that was the 800. So my H1 is font weight 600. And cool. And now I want to make it bigger. Size 48 pixels. More. Look at how close those letters are, though. How like that A, like practically fucking making out with the two. It's not really what's happening here. So we can fix that with letter spacing. We bring everything in just a touch, and then element inspect it. So that's 5. In design, it's called kerning. And it's not unusual, especially for headings, to kind of manually kern them. Let me check the space between the words. Yeah, that looks a lot better. The space between the words is called tracking. And that looks about right. Cool. And then these should be a little bit bigger. So I'm going to say that the nav is font size 32 pixels. Way too big. 24 pixels. Closer. I'm going to go with 20. Yeah, just right. All right, so that is starting to get there. Now the Furby is, that image is behind it. We're gonna deal with that in a sec. Let's get this login, sign up, and sign up kind of okay. So that has a spacer 2. And also needs to be the same size, which probably means that just make that the default size for the entire header. Yep. And then in this auth, I have 2 things. Since they're already like kind of kissing the right, I'm going to say that they have anchors in this have a margin left of, what did I do on the other one? Is it 24? 48. Are they that far apart? No, it looks like they kind of split the difference on that. So 24 feels right. Because it's one of those and then that like that little thing between them. So you could say something like nth of I'll see nth child 2. So I want to target the second one. I don't think I've ever done a pseudo selector and a pseudo element before. I don't even know if I'm allowed to do this. Let's see. Nth child before, I wanted to have a margin left and content of slash. Almost. Shoot, should it be that? Yeah. All right. Yeah, that looks a little bit closer. Okay, cool. So now we got to get this Furby image up there. So the way they did this, the Furby isn't in the design. It kind of like sits behind everything, which is why I have a hunch they just did a background image for that. So the way that we can simulate that, like the way we put it in CSS terms, is you're taking it out of the document flow. And so we need to take this out of the document flow. Easiest way to do that is to absolutely position it. And so I'm going to see. I call it a hero image. We'll call it product image. Item image. And domain-driven design, it's like a philosophy of stuff. So we're calling an item there. That means we should call it an item anywhere. That way, if we ever use a different word, we're referring to a different concept. Item image. And that is a direct child of app. Yeah. The item image, I'm going to position absolute. Oops, I did the wrong one. Call that easy bake. And just to keep this from fucking things up too much, I'm going to say that the easy bake is like margin top 100 pixels. Just get it out of the way. Oh, I see what's happening. It's just all the way down there. Because there's no other content to push it down. We're going to say that it is then 100 viewport height. Or viewport height. There we go. All right, that's a little bit better. Perfect. All right, so, oh shoot, so we need to tell it what to be positioned relative to, which I would have thought, why is it still in the document flow? I'm gonna say that this is position relative so that it tries to do it relative to that, and then tell it, go top 0. There we go, there we go. And so now it's covering up that header. So we changed the Z index to knock it back a little bit. There we go. All right. Starting to get somewhere. Where does that sit relative to that? Is it, so this A is, where is it relative to this little nubbin on his head? It's not the same distance there. It's pretty damn close. Okay, cool. I'll take that. Then elsewise, this goes like, yeah, kind of close, just on the other side of the titles thing. So that makes me think is that maybe I can knock this entire thing over a little bit. Like things like this are like, if you're trying to match it exactly, are a good way to kind of fuck the mobile responsiveness of it, because it's probably not terrible right now. But as soon as I do the thing I'm about to do, it sort of starts falling out the window. If I say that the nav in this should have like a margin left of, let's just start with something big, and start moving that over. I'm going to put this on the bottom so it doesn't keep screwing it up. This nav. Oh shoot, but I also wanted to do that with auctions. All right, so they both have one more. They both have like 400 pixels of whatever the fuck. So that's the nav. Ends up being 400. And then the H1's kind of in the same boat. Anything like that, that's worth using a compound selector like this so that you're not repeating yourself both times. If you need to change them, you need to change them both in the same place. And then, that's not 100%, but like, that's pretty in the ballpark. Might knock it back just a little bit. Cool, so there's the header. Ask me some questions about it.
Is there any way to make slight adjustments like that and keep responsiveness on mobile, or no? Not really.
Well, you could do it with media queries. So you go, all right, assuming you're looking at something that's at least this big, then throw this much over to the side. And then you can do little thresholds where they move them over like that. But you kind of only run into this problem when you're doing things like trying to make something look just like an image. In practice, it doesn't fucking matter that much. And without being able to see how it responds responsively, I don't know, making it exact match isn't more practical. And so you can do things that don't fuck this up, and may even like improve the design some. Because like that's the thing, if you do like a good implementation of a design, a lot of that responsiveness stuff kind of takes care of itself. It's only when you're trying to make it exactly what some other thing is that you start losing that. It might also get easier if I was able to figure out what the logic of how those things are horizontally spaced out are. Because it's probably not go 400 pixels over from the left side. There's probably like a grid that's consistent with a lot of other things. And on other pages, there's content over here. And just because it's not here doesn't mean that like it's not using the same design grid. I just don't know what that is.
Either that or they thought asymmetry looked cool.
Sure. Well, it does. Like asymmetry creates energy, but the values are generally not supposed to be arbitrary magic numbers. I don't know what the proportions of it are, though. Oh, here's a thing. They're the same size? About the same, proportionally. Cool. Other questions? All right, let's see if we can get some of this this big section here. So first thing is like, how much space is there between those? And like, even better if you can calculate it in multiples of something else. So like whatever that is, that looks like it's like maybe 3 or 4 of those. So I could say something like item details. So that's the section we're working on now. So there's a margin top of, what did I say the other one was? Padding on it was 48. So 96 maybe? Or let's see. Oh, you can do this in SAS. It's kind of cool. You can do 48 pixels. Actually, I don't even need SAS for that. It's regular CSS. You can do calc 48 pixels times 3. And then I need to get this entire thing over to the other side. So I can, see, I can grid that. I think it might be simpler to flex it over. So I need to look at its parent, which is app, and tell it I want it to flex, and I want it to flex in a column, because if I don't do that, what is it just jumbles it all up because it assumes I'm trying to go left to right. But I can change the flex direction to column and get it back. Looks like they didn't fuck up much else. And now you can only do this on your cross axis, but it's kind of cool. You can say align self, flex end, and then they go over here. So that is looking like way too much now. Cool. And these probably should have similar padding to the top and bottom, or 48. Yeah, so like kind of creates a good line there. Let's see how that matches with what they did. Yeah, cool. Should be just like that. So there to there. Still too much. Maybe it is just 48 pixels. Okay, now this gems from gems. See our citation. Oh shoot, I didn't pull in an italic for that. I'll show you how easy that is though. So our citations are going to be font style italic. So some of these are like, some of these start with text and some of them start with font. The way that you remember them is that like a font is a very specific thing. It's a font at a particular size, at a particular weight, and italics are part of that. This is actually a completely different font than this. They are from the same font family though. But like they have to design the glyphs for that separately. It's not just leaned over on its side. And so anything that has to do with like the actual font starts with font. Things like whether or not it's underlined, where it's centered or aligned or something, that's completely separate from like how the typographer designed the glyphs for that. So those ones start with text. That is a different font, and I don't think I have it. Oh, you know what the browser does though? It does just try to lean them over if it can't find it. So a way you can work around that. Which typeface is this? That's like the 300 weight of the other one. So what you can do is take a look at these imports and go, okay, 300 and 300i, and you'll get the italic for it. That one was Poppins. So we're going to say that the font family for this one is Poppins sans serif. Cool. And the weight on that one, default weight for the stuff in there, I'm going to say is the 300. Yep. All right, now we got, you have to do a similar thing with the anchors. Did any of those? So those two are underlined, and that one is underlined. Cool. So now we got to figure out the logic of this section here. So if I'm drawing it out, this is okay. I've got this thing here and this thing over. This thing is as far left as it can go, because remember, the T is outside of the box. This thing's as far right as it can go. So we have something here, and these are like justified out to the sides. And then we have this, which is this big H2 in here. And then these two are justified also. So we want 3 rows of this, but I wouldn't put them in a grid. That's just regular flow content. But we need something that's going to make them be grouped like that. We need 3 like ultimate containers that we're doing that with. So let's take a look at how it actually is semantically. So that P and the nav need to be together, and those 2 P's need to be together. So like the dirty cheat on this, because we're running out of time, is, let's see, I guess the P doesn't need it. Nope, it does. So with this, let's just throw them in a fucking div. Could say something like, or ooh, maybe. that could be a, call that a header, and maybe call that a footer. Oh, I don't hate that at all. Okay, so call that a header and that a footer. And that ends up working okay. Now what we have to do is, since we called this header, we need to say that it's specifically the header that's directly under app. Otherwise, everything breaks. But we could say inside of this header footer. So, and then within those, we can flex and push them out to the sides. So we say something like flex that, justify content, and the space between our wicked lines. So do that on the header and the footer. And then this H2 that we have in here, we want to be big and heavy. So that one was an 800 weight. And font size on that is simply ginormous. And somewhere that font got broken. We'll check that out in a sec. But, oh, cool, it worked, though. Check that out. And then like this thing being weird is just pushing those out to the side. That's fine. So let's figure out what's happening with that typeface. Does it not know what Poppins is? Did I call it the wrong thing? Or maybe it just didn't like that I tried to do that italic hack. There we go. Font, family, Poppins. Okay, it's there. So that's too big. Knock that down. That's a little too small. Cool. Oh, that's right. And I wanted to do some hacky shit with this. So like, this is also something that like, you might even do this programmatically or something, but we can do is put both of those in divs. Put those in divs so it'll like knock them on different lines. We could also tell it to wrap and maybe just constrain it. Yeah, I like that better. All right, but regardless, to get that T to do the thing that we're, or the we're, is it just the T? It was the whole the. To get that the to do the thing that we're talking about, you have to be able to target it. So you do need a little container in there. And then otherwise, the trick is that this H2, oh shoot. Maybe this entire container, I constrain the width of it. So like the max width is 300 pixels. So I can force that to wrap. Something kind of like that. And then in this H2, you can target the span inside of it and do a negative margin. Something like that. Oh, and it had a text transform also. Cool. And we're out of time, but hopefully you see hopefully you can see the end of the tunnel from this one. We got pretty close. What questions do you have? Is anybody still here even? There we go.
Still here.
Ahmed, did you come in here to get Kyle?
That may be the case.
Cool. Tell me anything you learned.
The display flex or inline flex, which blew my mind.
Nice.
I
I used
struggled.
that text transform before. That was pretty cool.
Site tag, never seen it, never heard of it.
So, yeah, two more.
I tend to do boxes within boxes, particularly for positioning. So all your gridding and flexing was new to me.
Awesome. Oh yeah, like grid and flex make this like the macro layout stuff tolerable. It's real hard to do a lot of these things without those tools. One more.
Watching you style the nav bar is really great.
Nice. I'm glad.
Yeah, using is it as a list or unlimited list was good to know. Easier.
Awesome. Cool. Well, hey, thank you so much. Hopefully this was helpful and fun and you took something out of it. And survey's coming out right now. And we don't have a whole lot of time, so do it fast. See you there.